So to start off this matchup, we have Duke versus Siena. Siena, congratulations on making it. I'm going to take Duke there. Not very much to say. Ohio State versus TCU, and Ohio State went out. Michigan dominated them that whole game in the Big Ten tournament. I think you got to carry the momentum. TCU, they played decent in the Big 12, so I'm going to take them there. So St. John's, I think they're one of the best, if not the best, 5 seed in this tournament. And against a Northern Iowa team that I think is one of the better 12 seeds, I just have to take St. John's. But if Northern Iowa was playing anyone else, it's one of the other 5 seeds, then I would probably take them as an upset. Moving to Kansas versus Cal Baptist. I like Kansas. I haven't watched much of these teams this year, but Kansas is the 4 seed. Cal Baptist is the 13, and I think Cal Baptist is not the best 13 seed in this tournament, so I'm going to take Kansas. Moving to South Florida, so they're playing Louisville, and Louisville, I think they're just a bit overrated. They kind of went out pretty bad in the ACC tournament, and South Florida, they're coming off a hot win in the American to win the conference. So I'm going to take them as an upset, so 11-6. Moving to Michigan State versus North Dakota State. Same thing with this. I think Michigan State's just the better team. They've been the better team all year. North Dakota State, congratulations, you won your tournament, but I think the road ends here for you. Moving to UCLA versus UCF. So UCLA played a great matchup against a Purdue team. They went all the way through the tournament, and they got to the semifinal of the Big Ten tournament. They ran into Purdue, who ended up winning it. And I think the fact that they were able to make that run and take Purdue to the wire would give them the edge over a team like UCF. And then moving down to the 2 versus 15 seed, I'm going to take UConn as the 2 seed to beat Furman. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. I don't love UConn as a 2 seed to move forward, but I'm going to take them there. So we're going to go to Duke and TCU, and I think TCU is just not the team that can take down Duke this year, so I'm going to take Duke. Moving to St. John's versus Kansas, and like I said, I think St. John's, after winning the Big East tournament, I have a lot of faith in them to be one of the better 5 seeds, and being one of the better 5 seeds, I'm going to take Kansas to lose to St. John's, and St. John's will be in the Sweet 16. Moving on, we've got South Florida and Michigan State. So I'm a Michigan fan, but I heard an interview where Tom Izzo actually, he rejected a compliment almost. He said he doesn't think Michigan State is one of the teams that could win the whole thing this year. And I think when you say that, you don't have a lot of confidence in your players. And I think a team like South Florida, if they pick up that first one at Louisville, I think they get a lot more confidence moving from an American Conference win to Louisville win in March Madness. So I'm going to take them as an upset over Michigan State, so 11-3 upset. UConn versus UCLA. So this was a close one. I wanted to pick UCLA, but I do like UConn. They have better experience in this spot, but I think that'll definitely be a close matchup that you should watch out for an upset. So St. John's versus Duke. I'm going to take Duke in this spot, but I think that'll be a good game too. Duke seemed to struggle in the ACC tournament against teams like Florida State, which is not even in the tournament, and Virginia, which I see doing pretty well in this tournament. But I do take Duke. They're the number 1 overall seed. But St. John's, I would also watch out for them as an upset. And then moving in, I got the 2 versus the 11. So I think if UCLA makes it to this game, they would win. I think whoever wins that UConn versus UCLA game wins. 11 seed, it would be pretty hard for them to make the Elite 8, so I just don't see that happening, so I'm going to take UConn. Moving on to the south side of the bracket, so we have Florida versus Lehigh or Prairie View A&M. Either way, I think Florida wins this game pretty handily. 16 versus 1s typically don't go well, for the 16 seed at least. Moving to Clemson versus Iowa, I'm going to take Clemson here. I like them in this spot over Iowa. I think Iowa had underwhelming performance in the Big Ten tournament, and I think Clemson, they held their own at least enough to give me confidence that they would win that game. Moving to Vanderbilt versus McNeese, and again, I like the the 12-5 upset, but I can't take McNeese to beat Vanderbilt. You know, after that win against Florida in the semifinal of the SEC tournament, I just have a problem picking against them. I know they lost to Arkansas in the final, but still, they kept it close most of the game, and I like them in this spot. Moving to Nebraska versus Troy, I'm going to take Nebraska here. I think those guys are motivated to get the win here. This would be Nebraska's first ever March Madness win, which is actually kind of crazy. They're the last power conference team to do that if they do so. Moving to North Carolina versus Virginia Commonwealth, I'm going to take North Carolina, but this one was definitely a close pick for me. It just came down to the 6 versus the 11. If I don't know, I'm going to take the higher seed, but it was definitely close. Illinois versus Penn. So Penn came up with the clutch win over Yale in the Ivy League tournament to win it, but I like Illinois. I like Illinois. I think they had a bad game in the Big Ten tournament, but I think if they won that first game, they could have really made a run, really made some noise. So I don't fault them for that much. Moving over to St. Mary's versus Texas A&M. So I'm going to take Texas A&M here. And the reason I say that is because St. Mary's coming out of a weaker WCC with only like teams really like Gonzaga and Santa Clara that were even tournament worthy this year. I don't think they're strong enough. I think they faltered at the end of the year, and that's not something you want to see out of the team. Meanwhile, Texas A&M, they came out of a pretty tough SEC with teams like Florida, Arkansas, and Vanderbilt, and I like them in this spot to win. Moving to Houston versus Idaho. So Houston, obviously, they were in the tournament final last year. Idaho, congratulations on making it, but I can't take you over someone like Houston. So moving over to Florida versus Clemson, I'm going to take Florida here. You know, they have more experience, they have the better players, and overall, it's just not really a matchup that I see Clemson winning. Moving to Vanderbilt versus Nebraska, I'm going to take the 5 seed again. You know, I think those boys at Nebraska will be motivated to get their first win, but when it comes to their second win, making a run, they don't have that type of experience. Meanwhile, Vanderbilt is still hot coming out of the SEC tournament and that good win against Florida, so I'm going to take them in that spot. Moving to North Carolina versus Illinois, and I like Illinois here. You know, it was close for me between Virginia Commonwealth and North Carolina, and if it's close in the first round, then you're probably going to pick against them second round, and that's what I see happening. Moving to Texas A&M versus Houston, I'm going to take Houston. You know, Houston's really good at slowing the game down. I think that'll stump Texas A&M, and I'm going to take them to win that 10 versus 2 matchup. So moving over to Florida versus Vanderbilt, and this is what I would say is the biggest upset so far of my bracket. I'm going to actually take Vanderbilt. You know, they had a pretty big blowout against Florida in the SEC tournament, which is pretty much one of the main reasons why I'm so high about them going into this. And I think if they can get them again, that's a really bad matchup for Florida just to have to play that. Moving to Illinois versus Houston. So I think this will be a pretty close matchup. I like Houston here. They have more experience, even though they're both pretty experienced in this spot. I do like Houston to win that game. Up next is the West region, and we've got Arizona versus Long Island. And I'm gonna take Arizona. I don't see a fight with that, but Long Island, you got a cool logo, so I'll give you that. Villanova versus Utah State. I'm going to take Utah State here. You know, typically the 8 seeds historically have struggled with the 9 seed matchup. And overall, I think Villanova came out of a weaker Big East this year, you know, with UConn struggling. The only team I really see out of that, with that, I would see going anywhere is St. John's. And so I'm going to take Utah State to win. Wisconsin versus High Point. So I definitely wanted to take High Point here, you know. I think I picked them last year in my bracket. To beat Purdue. But I think Wisconsin, they have the chance to go on a run. They kept it close with Michigan in the second matchup. They beat them the first matchup. And as a Michigan fan, I compare a lot of stuff to that, and I see Michigan as a really good team. So if you can hold your own against them, I think you're going to do good things. Moving to Arkansas versus Hawaii. Arkansas is the hot hand. I'm going to take them. They just won the SEC tournament. But Hawaii, great school. Just don't see them winning. Moving to BYU versus NC State or Texas. To be honest, NC State and Texas, they don't even deserve to be in the tournament. I think, I don't think either of them will make it. So I'm going to take BYU. Moving to Gonzaga versus Kennesaw State. So I know I said I didn't like the West Coast Conference this year, but Gonzaga, they really caught my eye. They won that league this year, and I think they're going to beat Kennesaw State pretty handily. Moving to Miami versus Missouri. This one I struggled with. I don't like either of these teams, so I went with the 7 seed Miami, but to be honest, I don't think either of them are that amazing, and I just don't see them doing much in this tournament. Moving to Purdue versus Queens. Purdue's getting hot at the right time. At the start of the year, they were good. They were ranked top, and then they went through a little skid in the middle of the season. They fell in the rankings. But I think they're going to come back, and I'm going to take them against Queens. So moving over to Arizona versus Utah State, I'm going to take Arizona here. 1 versus 9 matchup. Arizona is number 2 overall in the country. I'm going to pick them to win. But I think Wisconsin, with their 3-point shooting, will be a tough matchup for Arkansas. Even though Arkansas is a hot team, I'm going to take Wisconsin to win that. And then moving over to BYU versus Gonzaga. And I like Gonzaga a lot in this matchup. Typically, BYU is not the greatest in March, and I think that trend continues, and I think Gonzaga picks it up, and I'm going to take them to get the win. Moving over to Miami versus Purdue, I'm going to take Purdue here. They're hot at the right time. Don't love Miami at all, so I'm going to take Purdue. It's a pretty easy pick for me. I'm going to go over to Arizona versus Wisconsin. So the thing is, if Wisconsin gets hot with their 3-point shooting in this game, I can surely see them winning it. But if they don't get hot, they stay cold or just regular, I think Arizona has no trouble beating them. So I'm going to take Arizona to win that game. And now I'm going to take Gonzaga to beat Purdue. This is a tough game. I think these are the 2 best teams in the region. I don't love Arizona as much as I love Purdue and Gonzaga. Just with the timing of their runs and stuff. All 3 of them won their conference tournament, but I think Purdue and Gonzaga are the hotter teams right now. In the last region up, we have the Midwest region, and so Michigan will be playing the winner of Howard or UMBC. I like Michigan in this spot. I think they're just the overall better team. Either way, it's a 1 versus 16. Moving to Georgia versus St. Louis. St. Louis, they got knocked out in the semifinals of the A-10. I do think they're the better team here, even if they have the lower seed. So I don't think it's much of an upset, but I'm going to take St. Louis in this spot. Moving to Texas Tech versus Akron. I like the Zips. Texas Tech, they're a pretty good team, but if I'm going to pick one 5-12 matchup, I think Akron's the team that's going to do it. I think that would be the closest 5-12 matchup there is behind, or just ahead of Wisconsin High Point. Moving to Alabama versus Hofstra, and I'm not a big fan of Hofstra. I think Alabama takes this game, and I don't think it's close. Tennessee versus the winner of SMU versus Miami, Ohio. I'm going to take Tennessee. Miami, Ohio squeaked into this tournament. They have no quad 1 wins, and I think they got in. I think they should have got in, but I don't think they make any noise. And as for SMU, they're just barely made the cut. And I think Tennessee takes care of either one to come out of that game. Moving to Virginia versus Wright State. I think Virginia, they held their own versus Duke right up until the end. They only lost by 2. And I think they're a really good team to watch going into this tournament. This matchup with Kentucky and Santa Clara, I'm going to take Santa Clara. I typically like to take 2 10 seeds to win, and so it would be Texas A&M and Santa Clara. But I could see this game going either way. Both of these teams have a pretty good resume for being a 7 and a 10 seed, much better than Miami or Missouri, in my opinion. Iowa State versus Tennessee State. I think Iowa State runs away with this. Tennessee State hasn't made it since the 90s. They've got no experience whatsoever. Moving to Michigan versus St. Louis. I think St. Louis could give Michigan some trouble if they get hot, but in the end, I think Michigan wins that. They're the better team. Akron versus Alabama. I get the Zips winning, you know. I think if any 12 seed makes a run, it would surely be them. And if Alabama just falls asleep at any point during that game, I think they pick it up. And I think the MAC will actually have Akron representing them, even though everyone thought it would be Miami. Moving to Tennessee versus Virginia, I think Virginia takes care of business pretty well. They're probably one of the better 3 seeds, if not the best 3 seed, so I'm going to take them in this. Maybe them and Gonzaga are pretty neck and neck. Santa Clara versus Iowa State. I'm going to take Iowa State, but I wouldn't be surprised if the 10 seed won it here. Moving on to Michigan versus Akron, and I think this is where Akron's run comes to an end. A guy like Yaxel Lenderborg, he's going to keep his composure. He's going to slow down the Zips. They're going to know how to tame their energy, and Michigan's going to take the win there. Virginia versus Iowa State. I think Virginia's the better team. I'm going to take them to win. They're probably, them and Gonzaga are probably the 2 best 3 seeds in this tournament. Duke and UConn. I think UConn snuck by this with an easy matchup. They drew pretty easy games, but I think the road ends here. I like Duke to win in the Elite 8 over UConn. Moving over to Vanderbilt versus Houston. I could see this game going either way. If Vanderbilt's hot, they're beating Florida. I could see them definitely making a run here, but Houston's got the experience. Kelvin Sampson's going to be determined to win this here, and I'm going to take them to advance to the Final Four. Moving over to the West region, we have Arizona versus Gonzaga, and I think this will be another good game. Probably one of the stronger regions for me, in my opinion, with Arizona, Gonzaga, and the 2 seed, Purdue. So I'm gonna take Gonzaga here. I like the 3 seed over the 1 seed, but it'll certainly be a close, good game. Michigan and Virginia. So I think if Arizona and Gonzaga goes one way, Michigan and Virginia will go the other. So basically, what that means, I think Arizona, Virginia, or Gonzaga, Michigan in the Final Four, but I went with Gonzaga, Michigan. Duke versus Houston in the Final Four. I like Duke here. I said Kelvin Sampson would be motivated, but in the end, Duke is the better team. They're the best team in the country, and I think they get the job done here. Same with Michigan and Gonzaga. It'll be a close matchup, but I think if Michigan's able to beat Virginia, they'll be able to beat Gonzaga as well. In the national championship, I have Michigan beating Duke 73-78. And the reason I have them beating them by this score, I'm pretty sure this was the score earlier in the season, and it just seems fitting to end it like this. I think Dusty May finally gets it done. He had his Final Four run with FAU a couple years back. I think he finally gets it done, and Duke's going to have to wait another year. I think if Michigan gets on a run, they're not going to be stopped. I think Duke, they're used to winning more, and I think they could be stopped if they were on a so-called run.